Hey guys, welcome back to Detroit Garage. Been getting a lot of questions lately about the differences between the 453N, the T, and the Silver Series. Can you turbo an N engine? What were the differences, So in this video, I'm gonna cover that. And mind the mess, I'm just in the process of cleaning up, as always. But I'll try my best to go through the differences with you. There are a lot of differences. I'm not going to get into the different engine setups, but just the differences in the blocks and components that made them better and more durable. So, yeah, well, let's get down to it, shall we?
Let's give them 2 extra.
This one here?
Yep. And then your way.
Okay, here's a 453N engine, naturally aspirated. And the big question is, can you turbo this engine? And the short answer is, yes, you can, but you would be best to change all the internals to be 453T compliant. I'll go over the connecting rods, piston differences and everything, but the N engines are 21:1 compression ratios. The crankshafts are strong enough to handle a turbo, no problem. I believe the part numbers are the same as the T, but I could double check that. Camshafts are different in them depending on the setup. They have a high lift camshaft for the most part. And the turboed T engines have the low lift camshaft. Again, it depends on the application. That can vary. So the problem here is with the open back, the T engine is enclosed and reinforced to make the block stronger to handle the power. So the N engine is stock 130 to 140 horse, and the turbo is standard 170 to 185, depending on the injectors. So this is the N block. You see it's open here. Another issue would be the turbocharging it. There's nothing here to stop the pressure from hitting this gasket and rear plate. And if these aren't perfectly sealed, they'll start to leak out here. So that's the problems I could envision with a converted N engine. I have converted a 353N to a T, and I changed all the internals. And so far, it hasn't been in service. I've only run it a few hours, but it runs really nice. So let's go look at the T block. So here's a 453T. The front of the block is essentially the same as the N block. I don't see any differences there. But the back is where the differences are. You see, this is reinforced and sealed. So that holds all the turbo boost and everything from hitting this seal here. So that's the N and the T block. The silver block is here. I don't see any differences between the silver and the T blocks. They're essentially the same. I don't see any difference at all. other than the fact that maybe the silver was made in the US, if I'm correct on that one, and a lot of the T blocks were made in Brazil. All right, so the heads are the same. The only differences in the heads are the valves. The N head has a non-turboed valve. Now that's changed. If you buy new valves now, they're all turbo valves. So you have turbo seats and turbo valves if you replace the seats and the valves. The rest is, as far as I know, the same. The heads, the T and the N head, like I said, are essentially the same. The silver, which this one is, should have had the dog bone in it. There was a cutout here to allow for more expansion. Just a little areas here. They were called dog bones. To prevent the cracking here, like these heads here, this one was really badly abused, but they lasted a lot longer. I've never seen one in the wild. I keep getting heads like this. So we spoke about the block, the valves, the head, and now we're going to talk about blowers. Let's do that. So the N, the T, and the silver blowers, they're all different. So let's cover that now. I'll put the blowers on the bench and we'll have a look at them. Okay, well here's the three blowers. You've got an N blower, a T blower, and the silver T blower. So the N blower is 15%, roughly 15% larger. The rotors are a lot longer, well, 15% longer roughly. So it moves more air for the naturally aspirated engine. The turbo in 1978, 1979, they went to a shorter rotor in their housing and a smaller blower. Because of the turbo, you didn't need this larger blower. So this came off my 1979 453T. This one here is an end blower that was on a 453T. So somebody put the end blower on the T engine, which I'll cover in just a moment. And this is the silver series. So the only difference in the silver series, it's physically the same size as the T blower, but it differs in a couple of ways. It has different gears on it. They're finer cut than the T and the N blowers. Then it has this bypass here. And I'll just quickly show you guys. It's worth a look at this. So this bypass saves 7 horsepower and approximately, with the combination of the new pistons and turbo and liners, 9% better fuel economy than the predecessor 453T. So here's the blower bypass. So at 5 psi, this opens and allows so it runs between the back of the rotors and helps equalize the pressure on the airbox side and the turbo side and reducing parasitic drag. It doesn't get rid of all of it because it's not 100% bypass, but it gets rid of most of it. So that's a total savings, they say, of about 7 horsepower. And it comes on at around 5 psi and fully open at 6.5 psi. So that's it for the blowers. Now back to the end blower. Myself included, a lot of guys put this on their turbo engines because it's 15% more air, 15 to 20% roughly more air running through the engine at all times. It draws a little bit more horsepower than the T blowers, but you're getting more air at lower RPMs. So I've got this on my 453T Silver, and I've put in a bypass system on this blower to operate at 10 psi, not the 5 psi like this one here. So I probably can contribute that factor to the low emissions I'm getting out of my engine. But I'm going to prove that on the dyno. So I'm just rebuilding this blower here as we speak. But here, I'll show you the rotor. Just a second. There it is. The other bit for it, I don't know where I put it, but this piece was cracked and broken off. And I'll show a quick video. It sat outside for 15 years, so water got into it, froze, and broke it. And blower off a 453. Gonna rebuild this one. Put a new rotor in it, put it back into service. That's a T blower, and this is the end blower. Again, I'm not 100% sure this is the cat's meow. If the engineers thought that the end blower on the Silver Series was so good, why didn't they use this blower? Instead, they re-engineered the T blower with the bypass and call it good. With the new liners, different engineered liners, they're calling that good. So anyway, I'm going to put that on the dyno, run it, and see how the engine responds. Okay, we'll talk about liners and pistons next. Okay, here's the pistons. There is another piston that should go here, and it was a 17 or a 17.5 to 1 end piston, but I don't have a sample of that anymore. I threw it out. But so here's the pistons. They all measure up the same. We have an N, a T, and the crosshead. So these are two trunks, N trunk, T trunk, and silver crosshead. This one's 21 to 1, this one's 18.7 to 1, and this one's 18 to 1 compression ratios. And the big difference with these pistons, these are one-piece pistons, one cast. They're steel pistons with a tin coating. These are steel pistons with a tin coating, but the crown and the skirt are two separate units to add a little bit of flexibility. So there's less piston slap, more efficiency. Instead of using a pin, like I'll show you here. Here, let's set you down so I can talk. All right. So instead of using a pin like this, they use a slipper bearing that goes on here, and a pin, and it bolts to the pin. So there it is there, bolted to that pin, and it's on a slipper bearing. There's a bearing in the back side here to take up the energy. All the rods are modified to cool the pistons, so they have these ports on the top. The only models that didn't were the Deere, the 253 Deere model that did not have piston cooling, for the Deere 435 and the Deere 440 crawler. But the rest, as far as I know, all had piston cooling. This one comes right up through here, and there's a hole in the crown to cool. The next big thing for the N and the T engine, if you want a turbo and N engine, is the wrist pin size. It's 1.375 inches. Before they went to the T engines, they made T pistons with the 1.375 inch pin. So there it is there. They made turbo pistons for these, and you could just change the pistons, and now you have a turbo N engine. There was a transition period where they offered T engines with the 1.375 inch pins, and you can still buy those pistons. PC Industries stock them. So you could technically put a turbo piston on this N rod and run it. This is the turbo rod. It's physically larger. It's a 1.5 inch pin. So it gives it extra strength and more bearing surface. See? That's the N pin in the turbo rod. So the next big thing about these pistons is the compression ratios. The N, see if I can get this turned up so you guys can see it decently here. They're all different shaped. I'll put that in there for now. There. So here's the 21-to-1 piston for the N engine. This is a 18.7 for the T. And they physically look about the same. They don't look much different other than the domes. They're the same diameter, the same height. Just the domes, you could see the difference here. This has got the wider lip and a pointy dome. This is shallower, and the dish is shallower as well. And now for the silver has a different profile as well to get that 18-to-1. Whole different design in the dish. The piston also differs in the amount of rings used and the type of rings for the silver series. So the oil control ring on the silver is much like this one. This is a silver set with the exception of these rings here. So the silver set has a large oil scraper, one piece, and then the two below that. The N and the T engines have this times two, so 4 of these. So this big ring is gone, and then you have 4 small scraper rings, 2 here and 2 there. You'll notice this has got a fire ring and 3 compression rings. The silver has 1 fire ring and 2 compression rings. Different material is used, larger fire ring and totally different materials. So the rings are different. The fire ring and these compression rings are different on the Silver Series. It's a different alloy. Instead of using chrome, they use a different alloy to give a better seal and longevity. So that just about covers the rods. And talking about rings, I'm told the rings on the T engine are different than the rings on the N engine. And if you turbocharge the N engine, you could possibly get a lot more blow-by due to the N rings in it. I don't have any personal experience with that, but that's just what I've read. Now let's talk about the ports. So this liner here has what's called tall ports. The distance between here and here is 0.84 inches. The silver, they changed that and made it 0.74 inches. These are tapered slightly different to give it a different air intake and a different swirl as well. So it's all re-engineered to give better fuel economy and more power and less emissions. So I'm going to try these liners, the 0.74 inch liners or 0.74 inch port liners. In my silver, I'm running these units with a performance camshaft. It runs perfect. It's a beautiful engine. But I'm told that this will give me better starting in the winter and overall more power, less smoke. But I'll know firsthand when I get it on the dyno. Okay, let's talk turbochargers. So we talked about the blowers. Now let's talk about turbochargers. So here's the different turbos. This turbo here is off of a green T engine from 1979. And this one here is off the Silver Series 1988. So the differences are the turbine housing is larger on this turbo. It is 64.7 inches, if I remember correctly. And this one here is 63.8 or something inches. So a smaller turbine for the silver versus the green T engine. So 0.96 AR housing and the silver 0.81. 0.96, 0.81. The front housing on the compressor housing on the Silver Series has a different compressor wheel in it. If I can remember correctly, 55-ish millimeters, 55, 56 millimeters. Now this one is a modified green turbo. This has got the silver housing on it. Silver impeller, compressor wheel, I should say. It should have this. Now this is all kind of banged up, and I've used this as a prototype for making turbo inlets, compressor inlets. So I'll pull out a compressor wheel. This is the compressor wheel from this housing. It's 54.5 millimeters from a 1979 green T engine. And that essentially is the differences. Here's a turbine shaft off of a 0.96 housing. This model here is a Garrett T04E98B. This one here is a Garrett T04E03. The front housing ARs are the same, 0.60, 0.60. I'm going to try this one stock on the dyno, put the different injectors in it, and see how it responds, and then probably end up boring this out to 62 millimeters and inserting a plug like this in, inserting this kind of a plug in it. Now for oil coolers. So again, here's another issue. If you want to turbo your N453, the oil cooler is really small. I'll go get one and compare it to a T and a silver. The T and the silver are both 13 plate. You can get an optional 16 plate, but I just run the 13 plate. So I'll go show you that. All right, here's the oil coolers. So we've got ourselves a Silver Series oil cooler, February 1988, and an N oil cooler from a 1968 453. This one's 8 plate. This one's 13. Like I said, they do come in an option of 16, so a little bit longer. Right about there. It requires a different housing, I believe. I don't have any 16 plate coolers. So that's another issue. If you want to turbo an N engine and run it on the road with big injectors, you're going to run into more issues again with cooling. You need to cool that oil. I'm running this plate on my Silver Series, and it's in summer, 90 degrees at high elevations. I'm getting 210 degrees oil, about 190 to 210 roughly. Depends if I'm empty, 190, and if I'm towing, 210 max. I've never seen it go above 210. This one here, I don't know. You'd have to experiment. So that's the other issue with putting a turbo on an N engine. So the last thing I want to talk about, I think the last thing I want to cover are camshafts. So we have here a rebuilt V7L camshaft. That's a low lift camshaft. So when you're building the engine, you got to get the springs to match the lift on the camshaft. On my Silver outside, I'm running a V7, a high lift cam, reprofiled with high lift springs. I realized I keep talking about this engine, but I never show it. A lot of you guys are new viewers. So this is my 2009 Ford F350 with a Silver 453T in it. It's not stock. Has a modified turbo I built with a 59 millimeter compressor wheel. Modified valve cover. Again, I had issues just trying to get the profile right. Anyway, that's a long story in itself, but it's got Jake heads on it. And the blower's on this side. It's an N blower with larger injectors. It's got silver pistons and rods in it, silver crank, silver camshaft. The camshaft's a modified high lift camshaft with a different profile to give it better airflow. High port liners, 0.84 liners, and the blower is bypassed. Got a 2-inch bypass on it, and I've got that set to 10 psi. With the 7A77s and the water meth injection, it's approximately 240 horse with the water meth on, 50-50 mix, methanol and water. Without it, it's about 210, just with fuel. It's attached to the Ford 5R110 torque shift transmission. So I've got about 65,000 miles on this swap now. Yeah, 62 to 65,000. I've lost track, but it runs really sweet. Really nice engine. So there you go. For those new viewers who've never seen it, this is it. Okay, so here's 3 camshafts. They're all 453 cams. This one's out of an N. There's the part number there, and it's a V7 cam. Let's see if I can get a good stamp for you. All right, so right there, the V7 stamped on it. Man, you could always look up that part number. It'll come up with the profile of the cam. This one here is a V7L out of a 453T, and it's a low profile cam, low lift, and there's the number there. V7L cam. Yeah, it might not be easy to read, but V7L stamped on both ends of the camshaft. And lastly is the silver cam. It has a different part number, like most silvers. Starts with an 892 number, opposed to a 510 or a 512 for the older engines. And it's a V7L. Very hard to read because it's just, it's not stamped. It is anodized by the looks of it. But yeah, you can barely make it out. V7L. See if this is, yeah. So that's the camshafts for the different engines. And then we want to talk gearing. So that's the last item on the agenda, is the gears, the timing gears. So the 453 series run these type. The N and the T run these gears. I won't get all the gears out, but I'll just show you what I'm talking about. So you see the helix on these? I forget how many teeth. I think, I'm just guessing. I don't know. I forget the amount of teeth, but there's less teeth on the coarse gear set than the silver series. So that's a pile of gears. So we got 2 cam gears here, an idler gear, and the crank gear. One other item before I go on is the counterweights. The counterweights are different on the silver than they are on the N and the T engines. Because the pistons are heavier, they require a heavier counterweight. And I'll show you that in just a sec. So another advantage of the silver versus the green gears is they're quieter and they last longer. They used a different hardening process to make them last longer. Okay, here's the front pulleys, and they're different. They're weighted differently from each other. This is a 4-cylinder. They're all stamped 2, 3, 4, 6. This one's different because it says 4-cylinder crosshead pistons only. So you're not supposed to mix them up with the trunk pistons. And that's the difference here. It's way different. See, made in Brazil. Brazil. Okay, and this leads me to the last item for noise reduction, and that's the valve covers. So I'll go grab the different valve covers. So here's the different valve covers. We've got an N valve cover here, a T valve cover, 453T, and then the silver valve cover, 1988. The tin radiated a lot of noise, so again, to get the silver quieted down more, they introduced the aluminum valve cover with a rubber seal, which this one's missing, and that stopped the leaks and toned down the noise considerably. So a large wire mesh to absorb the blow-by gases and get the oil out of it when it passes through. Large blow-by tube. The N cover, it doesn't have any wire mesh. It's just like a splash guard, and that's it. And a relatively small, I think that's 7/8 or so, and this is 1 1/8. So a lot smaller for the gases to go by if you did want a turbocharger. They came with these quart gaskets that are prone to leaking, and that's why they upgraded to the rubber gasket. And then the T cover, again, it's tin. Large wire mesh to absorb the to separate the oil out of the gases. So one more item I forgot to talk about was the drive shaft for the blower. On the N and the T engines, they're basically the same. But on the Silver series, they changed the gears again on here, and the shaft is a hardened steel shaft, as are these teeth in here, to make them last a lot longer. Okay, on the topic of blower drive shafts, so I have 3 H hardened steel shafts and 1 standard shaft. This one here is a standard shaft. So let's put them in the blowers. So you see that we got the H on here. This cover goes on here like this. So hardened steel. Another one with an H. And then this one is the standard blower drive shaft. It's not hardened. So it's the former shafts would have gone in there on a coupler. And so that's the shaft differences. And then the last item, again, difference between the silver and the N and the T is the rear crankshaft seal. So here's the old style that you lubricate when you put it on, and it runs the same sleeve on the hub. And this is the new one. It's a Teflon seal. It's got the 892 number on it. It's a Teflon seal put on dry. So the Teflon rubs off onto the sleeve, and that's what creates the seal. Same with the blowers. Upgraded seals. So I'll do a separate video on rebuilding this one, but it's going to get new seals in it, and they're Teflon as well. The old O-ring seals that are in it get removed, the new Teflon ones get put in. So this will have Teflon seals, and this one Teflon seals. But the old N has the old O-ring seals. Okay, here's the front covers. We've got a silver, these are 453 models. So we got a silver 453 T, a green 453 T, pardon me, and we've got an N front cover. So this is beveled out for a washer. You can see here, just a rubber seal. And this pushes up against it, seals in here. The T block, and it has the gasket as well. And of course, the silver has the gasket. The pumps, from what I can tell, this pump's gone. I gave it away. They're all the same. The pickups, I'll just stick that for now. I'll just put that there for now. The pickups, this one's 1 inch, and the silver series is 1 1/8 inch in diameter. So it's a larger pickup. And of course, it comes with a gasket and bolted on like that. So that's the lower front pump housing. Like I said, the pumps are the same from what I can tell. I don't see any difference. Okay, so here's the upper front covers. This is a silver series, 453T or N, either one, and 453T or N. This came off of 453T, aluminum. I don't know if it was native to the engine or not, but this came off of a N 453, and you can see the bridging on the silver series. It's reinforced, all the bridging here, to quiet it down and add strength. So that just about does it, guys. We got a gaggle of Detroits in this shop that have to be rebuilt in no particular order eventually, but for now we're gonna finish this one off. So I'll continue cleaning parts and hanging parts on it, and then tomorrow I order the parts for it, so you'll be seeing more of this engine shortly. But the next video you should see is rebuilding this end blower. Well, there you have it, guys. That was viewer requested, so I hope that answers your questions on the differences and whether or not you should or shouldn't turbo an N engine. It's up to you if you want to try it. I know a few guys that have just thrown a turbo on it, but a lot of them have run into issues with blow-by, like I said earlier. So who knows? I don't know. You'd have to try it out and see what you think. But that's the differences right there. So again, thanks for checking in, and we'll catch you on the next video. Take care.